Hey everybody, and welcome to the first ever edition of Craft Brewed Sports, Cincy Style. I am Mike. With me, as always, here is Scott. Scott, how you feeling tonight, man?
Hello.
That was weird, but cool. Thank you. The man behind the
Feeling
computer.
good.
The man behind the computer making us sound and look good is Joe. Joe, how you doing tonight, bud?
What it do, baby?
Fantastic, Joe. This is Craft Brewed Sports, Cincy Style, where the takes are just like the chili. You're probably only going to like them if you're from here.
And even then, maybe not.
Probably not. There's a lot of people that don't like the chili, and that's fine. I'm cool with it. But who we do like is Minuteman Tickets, and we want to tell you guys, Craft Brewed Sports Cincy Style is brought to you by Minuteman Tickets. Look, everybody, football is back. There's only one spot you should be heading to get your college football or NFL tickets, and that's Minuteman Tickets. We love Minuteman. They're Ohio guys, sports fans, just like the rest of us, and they're not going to screw you over like those other ticketing places. Not just football either. They got it all. Baseball, hockey, theater, rib cook-offs. It doesn't matter. Hit them up, MinutemanTickets.com, or give them a call, 614-943-3000, and avoid all of the fees. Tell them you heard about them right here on Craft Brewed Sports, Cincy Style. Thank you, Joe. So let's tell the people.
The first of many.
Definitely. Let's tell the people how we came to this idea for this show, because we've been doing Craft Brewed Sports for about 3 years now. It's a show that we are very proud of. However, we don't really focus on Cincinnati sports. We focus more on the national stories, the stories that might slip under the radar, people don't necessarily pick up on. But Joe came up with this idea that was like, look, we're all Cincy transplants. We should be talking some Cincinnati sports. And we've also kind of taken some different paths as well since we came to Cincinnati. Joe stayed true to his roots, held true to the teams that he cheered for growing up.
Cleveland or die.
Yeah, that guy right there. Scott, you have also
stayed
true to your
true.
teams.
They just don't happen to be from here.
Right, but you also, working for WCPO, you covered the Bengals, the Reds, the Cincinnati Sports, so you had that really in-touch feel. And I am the only glutton for punishment on this crew that I actively chose to be a Cincinnati fan. I grew up a Cleveland sports fan.
Weirdo.
That shows.
Kevin Durant over here, everybody.
You may call me a snake. That's fine. That's fine. But I feel like a snake would go to a franchise or a team that is going to dominate. I'm not going to be the one that's
What's up, Brooklyn?
That's a fair point. Good
Does that
point,
make
Joe.
me the flat earther?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're the flat earther in that case. If I'm Durant, then you're Kyrie, right?
That's definitely not how this goes.
So we talked about it, and we were like, you know what? We need to do a show specifically about Cincinnati sports. There's enough in this city that we can cover strictly Cincinnati sports and make it a fun, entertaining show.
And
so that's
we
what we decided to do.
loosely know enough to give
Bro,
our takes that matter.
You may loosely know enough. I am that.
You're all the way
I
in.
am that crazy fan that I'm basically Dave Lapham. Watching Bengals games.
Yeah,
That is,
I mean,
And
I know,
drinking.
well, yeah.
I know
that goes
enough.
without saying I'm a Bengals fan.
I know enough through osmosis. Like, you can't live in a city and not know how the sports teams are doing unless you actively, are trying to. Especially if you're a sports fan. I mean, it's not possible. I know that there's people that live in this city who don't follow sports at all that wouldn't be able to tell you anything. I've lived here their whole lives, but me being such a huge sports fan and not following any of them, but it's just like, hey, you hear about it every day or every other day, and you just know what's going on just because. So.
And that's good. So we've got a good mix here of a rational sports fan who can bring me back to earth throughout these seasons, because
Yes.
I come up with I get way into things and it goes a little off the rails. So I need somebody who can rein me in. And then I also have Joe here to just rain on my parade and talk about Cleveland the whole time. And
Baker, the touchdown rainmaker.
That's well done too with the touchdown rainmaker on the rain on my parade. So thank you, Joe, for that. So let's just get right into it tonight. All right. It's episode 1. We decided to start the show here at the beginning of September because the NFL is back, baby. Football is back.
College football's back as well. All of the football.
Yes. But more importantly, it's a new day, DEY, here in Cincinnati.
That's not how you spell day.
It is. If you're a Cincinnati fan, that's how we spell day. It's a very
Cincinnati
strange.
fans have never known how to spell, so that makes sense.
They're going to love us already, Scott. Thanks for that.
Just when I drive past the billboard, I'm like, it's not that clever.
Fair enough. You can send your hate mail to our Twitter at Craft Brewed Sports, or you can direct it
Directly
right
tweet
to
it to
Scott
me.
at Scotty_K_Jr. Remember, I'm the one who understands us Bengals fans. So let's talk some Bengals coming up here. Season kicking off. We got the Seahawks in week 1. How are we feeling about this? How Scott and we should preface this by saying you also help co-host the Flying Pigskin for WCPO as well. You actually had a chance to talk to Zach Taylor for your first episode of the season, right?
Yeah, met Zach Taylor the other day for the first time. Very nice dude.
I stalked him at a playground once. I almost asked him to do our show, but I got really nervous.
He's really soft spoken. Like
That's
I don't
strange
take
for an
that as
NFL coach,
right. I
right?
don't take NFL head coaches for being soft spoken, and maybe he was just all right. I'm here and I'm just doing this interview, and I don't want to be I don't want to take over anything. I'm new kid on the block, but he was very chill, very mellow, just down to earth, and I walked away thinking that he'll have success not because of anything necessarily on the field, but just his personality is even keeled, so he's not going to get too high or too low.
That's funny you say that because we just got rid of a coach who was the most even keeled coach of all time. Never showed any emotion.
I know, but the problem with Marvin was I think that it was a fake not showing emotion. He didn't want to show emotion in the media and do all that. Like he played the part of NFL head coach in that, all right, well, I'm just going to give static answers and the cookie cutter answers. But I think in the locker room, he was actually more.
I don't know, man.
You
see him on the sideline. You watch Marvin on the sidelines, and it just seemed like he was just.
And I said in
present.
the locker room, didn't I?
All right, that's fine. But still, you
got
to show
off
some.
to a great start.
You got to show.
Listening to what I'm saying.
I'm just saying, you got to show some emotion on the sidelines too. Like you.
Well, I feel like
nobody wants Jason Garrett just clapping.
Right. Well, I feel like Zach is going to get to that point, but it's just right now he's taking the temperature of the room and he's gauging everything and he's learning and. I mean, he's got to know that he's young and people are looking at him.
Dude, he's younger than both of us.
No, he's not. I thought he was younger than me until I found out just before we started recording that he turned 35 recently, and
so he's
am
younger
not
than me.
35.
Great,
Yeah,
thank you.
I am not 35 yet, so speak for yourself.
Older than me.
Makes me feel great to know that I'm older than Zach Taylor, and I'm the only one in the room older than Zach Taylor. So Zach Taylor comes in. He's got a lot to prove. Everybody has talked him up this offseason as being this offensive genius. Like you hear all these players from LA coming out talking about how amazing this dude is, and you have to wonder, like, what we've seen in the preseason, is he really, or are the Bengals just in a spot that they're not ready to perform at the level that he wants them to?
Yeah, I mean, this was the thing that I took away from the meeting. Two things. One, he's even keeled, and I think that'll serve them well. But two, he was very cautious with all of his words and all of his answers, and that I think he knows what they are and how far they have to go. He said all the right things, but you get the sense that he's well aware that they're talent deficient, across the board. If you're talking about competing for a Super Bowl and playoffs and all that, he's not stupid enough to think that this team is going to make a lot of noise. I'm sure he has high expectations, and he'll tell you one thing.
You have to.
Right.
You got to have
but
high expectations.
I also think he's smart enough to know that, like, hey, this is going to be a process. This is year one of the program, and I'm going to get my guys in here. I'm going to implement things. Whatever we do well and however many games we win, gravy. Because, they're just not... Like, on paper, they're just not a team that's positioned well.
Whoop-de-hey. Whoop-de-hey.
Yeah.
I would love it if, like, in a post-game press conference, somebody was like, well, Zach, you guys came out. You guys got this W to start off the season. What do you think of that? And he was just like, it's gravy, baby. And then that was it. That was just his whole press conference.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not to say that they can't, surprise even him. But I think all coaches and personnel people and everything, like, they know, and they're not, they're not immune to what everybody else knows. It's not as if, well, I'm a head coach and I have blinders on and all this other stuff. Like, they know talent, they know what they have, they know, he knows he's a new head coach and everything. Like, he can have expectations up here. But, I mean, realistically, if he said, if you ask Zach Taylor, what's the absolute most wins that you could have if everything goes perfect, I think he'd tell you about 8 or 9.
So with that being said, is that a better expectation than you had last year with Marvin Lewis, or like, are you expecting a downtick? Are you expecting something better? Like, what are your expectations going into this year than last year?
So from the fan perspective, going into last year, it was just I didn't think the team was going to be very good. I expected them to be. I knew the Browns were this like team that everybody thought could make some crazy noise, and it was kind of scary. It's always scary to play the Browns. I feel like the Bengals always split the series with the Browns for some reason. You still had Pittsburgh in the division, and Lamar Jackson was like this big question mark of like, this dude could be amazing in this division.
Well, they still had Flacco too, right, last year?
Yeah, but
he was on the tail.
Everybody knew Lamar Jackson was going to take over at some point for Baltimore. So I kind of went into last season expecting the Bengals to finish at the bottom, and a lot of that was because I didn't have faith in Marvin. Like, I thought Marvin was supposed to be gone, and then he comes back, and it's like, oh, great, here we go.
I mean, I got to be real honest about Marvin. I think that they kind of overachieved the last 2 years.
Definitely.
Under Marvin, because it was, you came into both years thinking, this ain't it, and, they're going to struggle a lot. And then they'd somehow find these little pocket of runs where at the end of the year you look at their record and you think, that was a little bit better than I expected.
Dude, it was,
to be.
yeah. It happened all the time where it was like, they shouldn't have won that game. How did they get
Right.
that W?
But the problem,
I just chalked that up to the NFL, not Martin. The NFL is just that weird league.
That's true, but I mean, the problem with that is, back to Joe's original question about like, how do you feel then versus now is, then it felt, okay, even though they overachieved, where's this all going? It doesn't seem like there's any plan. It's just kind of meandering along. Whereas if they were to overexceed expectations this year, you're thinking, all right, Zach Taylor's got him headed in the right direction, and there's hope.
Well,
with Marvin,
yeah.
it just felt like, okay, yeah, they overexceeded expectations, but they're just kind of spinning their wheels.
I feel like with this season, everybody is going into this knowing that you have a first-year head coach. You have an offensive line that's just been absolutely decimated. You lost A.J. Green early in training camp, so you don't even have your number one weapon to start off the season. And you've got a defense
your best
that's
player, period.
Right. And you have a defense that's suspect at best. So I think everybody has extremely low expectations going into this season, but they're all willing to give the Bengals some slack on this one. Where last year it was like, if you don't perform, get Marvin the hell out of here.
Right, and
you know
it was
what I mean?
regardless of anything that happened, it was just expecting results no matter what.
In both situations, we're expecting a terrible team or a team to underachieve, but last year it was like, okay, then get him out. This year it's like, give him some slack.
Well, and I said this on the other podcast. It's just this year you're looking for. I don't need to. This year you're looking for wins in other places than necessarily actual standings. You're looking for competitive play. You're looking for guys to make strides, or it's obvious that they got to go, and for Zach Taylor to make wins in the offseason for when he replaces these guys or whatever. So it's like, yeah, the wins are nice, but you're just looking for a competitive football team, which despite whatever they got over from Marvin the last few years, it might have been competitive, but competitive in a way where you knew overall it wasn't going to get you where you wanted to be.
So then this comes to Andy Dalton. A lot of people say get rid of Andy Dalton. A lot of people are like, well, Andy Dalton's pretty good. And it comes back to Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers will never let the Chargers, San Diego, be terrible, right? He will never let the San Diego Chargers bottom out. Is that with Andy Dalton where it's like Andy Dalton's good enough to where he will win them games that he shouldn't, but he will never win them amazing games? Will he ever let the Bengals bottom out?
No.
Or is he too good to keep them above terrible?
It's kind of amazing to hear the phrase, Andy Dalton is too good to do something, because he is just such a middle-of-the-pack quarterback when you look at quarterbacks in the NFL. I respect Dalton for what he's done for the team. He's done a hell of a job with what he's been given. but he's not that guy that elevates a team, right? He's very much, to your point, Joe, a Phillip Rivers, where he's not going to lose you games. I take that back. He's going to lose you a few games along the way because he's going to make some decisions where it's like, Dalton, what are you doing, bro?
I think, and it's not just here right now. I think this has been his whole career. I think Phillip Rivers has gotten underappreciated throughout his career. I compare Andy Dalton more to like an Alex Smith.
All right, what about Eli Manning?
Eli Manning's won 2 Super Bowls, so it's hard for me to compare to a guy that won 2 Super Bowls.
Yeah, but that catch wasn't his.
I know that's fine though. I mean, but he's still done a lot
Still
more.
got them rings.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're not talking about him being a Joe Flacco or a Trent Dilfer.
Okay. Brett Favre.
Brett Favre's got rings too.
Brett Favre's in the Hall of Fame.
He's
I
also
hate
got-
Brett Favre, but I got to give him his credit.
I would put Dalton more along the lines
Andy
of
Dalton's Alex Smith. I've said it his entire career.
Alex
He's
Smith
Alex
is a good
Smith.
one. Kirk Cousins, maybe.
Yeah, he's good
he's
enough
just a guy
to
that's
win you
there.
games, but he's never going to be the reason you win the
But I
big
also
game.
feel like a lot of that is because Dalton has not been put in positions to be able to get to that next level. Like you have a team where the defense has failed Dalton, or his best weapons go down in injury.
Montez.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Vontez and Pac-Man, for that, because that could have been okay. I don't even want it to. That could have been the turning point right there. If you think about it, they win that game. Marvin Lewis is still this head coach, right? He's still coaching this team.
They beat Pittsburgh, and it's the whole different thing.
Monkeys off the back. Everybody's feeling great. That is such a. And that's such a Cincinnati fan. I know, you give me the look. That's such a Cincinnati fan to hang my hat on. Like, if they had only beat Pittsburgh that one time, everything would have turned around, baby.
No. I do think, though, that the perception of the regime and the team and Dalton, added into that would be different if they had just won one.
Just one.
Dude,
They only needed one.
Beat Houston one of the 2 times. Beat Pittsburgh that time, and they had it in hand. Like, all they had to do was win a single play. I honestly believe if they had won a single playoff game of any of those, that Marvin would still be here.
Absolutely.
Like,
That's what I was saying. Marvin would be head coach for life if he had won a playoff game. There'd be a Marvin statue outside of Paul Brown Stadium right now if he had beaten Pittsburgh in that game. Hands down. I fully believe they wanted to build him a statue anyways.
I was going to say, they wanted to erect a statue before he actually did that. So there's no doubt that if he had won that game, he'd be president of the city right now.
All right, so
no longer mayor.
Talking landscape of that NFC North, where are the Bengals?
I
1,
mean,
2, 3, 4. You got
okay.
Bottom.
Realistically,
there's absolutely
if
no
I
doubt
take
in my
my
mind they're
Bengals
the
hat
bottom.
off, I feel like they'd come in at the bottom.
so they lose twice to Baltimore, or they split with Baltimore?
I think they split with Baltimore.
They can split with Baltimore, and that won't matter.
Okay, you're gonna love this, Joe, from me, but I think they lose to Cleveland twice. I think they eke one out against Pittsburgh, and then maybe a split with Baltimore.
Does
Maybe.
Baltimore split with Pittsburgh?
No, I think Pittsburgh beats Baltimore twice. The division.
So then Baltimore would be last in your scenario.
No, because I think Baltimore beats Cleveland just to get you mad. I'm going with that pick.
I actually think that Baltimore.
I think Baltimore's third in the division.
I think Baltimore is probably second.
I would like to put them at 2, but Pittsburgh I feel like is that team that always, no matter what, it's always like, God, where did these dudes come from?
Off. I think Baltimore's second to Cleveland.
Okay.
Meaning that the Steelers finished third.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm saying I feel like Baltimore comes in third because the Steelers are always that team that just shows up and they come in second. And unfortunately, Cleveland wins the division.
This is the year that it finally catches up with the Steelers. And I don't even think that the Steelers
That's
will be
what we always say. It's
I know,
always like,
but I don't think that the
gotta
Steelers
be
are
the
even
year.
going to be a bad team. They'll probably look better than they have the last 2 years. But the Browns have gotten that much better, and I feel like the Ravens are good enough to edge them out.
So this is the AFC North is such a weird division this year because you have 2 first-time head coaches. You also have a quarterback who's in his second, season and a half. Lamar Jackson is season and a half. And then you have a quarterback who is in the twilight years with Ben Roethlisberger, who just lost his probably best target with Antonio Brown in the offseason. He lost his running back over the last season. So it's such a weird division this year. I do think it's going to be a hard one to pick, but I think the Browns end up taking this one.
Browns,
Right?
Browns, Ravens, Steelers.
If you're looking
Bengals.
on paper, it's got to be Browns top and
Absolutely.
Bengals bottom. Flip flop Pittsburgh and Baltimore, however you want, but it's going to be Browns at the top and Bengals at the bottom.
Right.
But it all starts with week 1, and this is where everything could change, and we could see an offense that comes out in this week 1, and we're like, oh damn, Zach Taylor really does got it. He
Nah.
really could do this.
They could win week 1, and I still don't think that the season will end up that well. Because week 1, you can end up chalking it up to the fact that they came out fired up for the new head coach.
But they came out and went
and
West
because
Coast.
it was a new day, DEY.
DEY. It's a new DEY.
Yeah.
So
That
you're
being said,
saying,
I don't think they're going out to Seattle to win.
it's gonna be a tough one.
Better teams go out there and lose all the time. All the time. It is not. Seattle is not a place that any team goes into and wins, especially not a team that's in transition. So, the spread is 9.5. I think they might cover that, but that's
Also,
about
isn't it weird that the Bengals are starting off this year with an NFC West team? Like, what a weird team to start off your schedule with.
That's not
That's
weird.
strange.
The whole
right?
the whole conference is.
No, I know they
No,
do that,
that's
but
not-
why is that week 1?
No, that's not weird. I just think it's weird that they're like, guess what? You're going out to Seattle. Like, that's a long travel.
That's what I'm saying.
for them.
In
Like,
week 1, that's a very strange week 1 matchup of like, guess what? You're gonna go play an NFC West team at their place.
well, but again,
Good luck.
it's even the one that they do because I mean the rest of them are more so like Washington being up there. It's so secluded in Seattle. It's a different area, and so having to travel there for your very first, like any team in the league, it's like, oh man, we got to go to Seattle week 1. That's a heck of a way to start the season. So, the Bengals are the envy of absolutely no one in the NFL having to start the season there.
Yeah, especially with the Ravens getting to start off the season against the Dolphins. That is
They're Pittsburgh's at New England, and the Browns get the Titans at home.
all right. So again, the Bengals get this weird, crazy road trip to start off the season. I guess I would rather have them have this West Coast trip to start the year rather than have this in the middle of the season.
Yeah,
where
you get used to your routine, and
Right.
now it's just like I just start out
Yeah.
west. We can be out there the whole year, or
That's
the whole week. I mean,
Right. Yeah. You can pregame a little bit differently, but man, it's just strange that to go NFC West. I wish we had the Dolphins to start off as a Bengals fan.
No doubt that the
mean-
Ravens start off with a cupcake.
Goodness
it's the
gracious.
equivalent of hosting Boise State. Only maybe they'll Willie Taggart it. Who knows?
Ooh, let's hope Seattle Willie Taggart says maybe Seattle didn't hydrate enough, and they're gonna blow this one. Similar
There you go.
to how Florida State blew it.
Cut off the water supplies to Washington this
the
week.
Bengals do get the Dolphins second to the last game. Hopefully.
Oh, good. When we're mathematically eliminated and we're just like,
You know what's funny about
Running
that
out the
game?
clock.
If it's the second to last one, those two will be fighting to want to lose it for draft positioning.
well,
both,
that's it.
both
The
fan
Dolphins
bases.
everybody's on the Dolphins for tanking.
Right,
so-
both fan bases will be hoping that they lose that game for draft position.
So if you're thinking about it, you tanking for Tua? Are you? What are the other quarterbacks out there?
I mean,
that are-
Jalen Hurts is going to come out, right?
Yeah,
He'll be out this year.
hurting
Fields,
for Hurts. Hurting for Hurts.
hurting for
I
Hurts.
actually dig that one. I know you said on our show this week that Hurts is not the guy that you would draft if you were the Bengals.
So you'd be tanking for Tua.
tanking for Tua all the way.
You think Tua is going to be the guy? First of all, let's back this up. So you mentioned this too, how you said
Actually, I'd
that
be tanking 2 years. I'd be slanging for sunshine.
that's the guy you got to get.
Yeah, like can
Like,
we lose 2 years?
As
in
a
row?
matter of fact, the Bengals are in a great position because the Dolphins are tanking now, which
Yeah,
is
so
a
they're gonna
dumb
get
move.
Tua.
You get like a top 5 pick this year, and then next year, boom, bottom out,
Go Browns.
grab Trevor, and then you're all set. You mentioned, Scott, earlier that Zach Taylor needs to get his guys in and whatever. Do you think Andy Dalton fits this Zach Taylor offense, or do you think we are at the end of Andy Dalton?
Because those are kind of the same thing. Because I'm gonna say I think he fits it for this season. I think if Andy Dalton was the younger version of himself, he would be all right in this offense. But I think when you're coming in to the Andy Dalton situation, and after this year you can get out of it without owing him anything, you can just cut him and cut bait. I think unless he turns back the hands of time and just performs ungodly like we've never seen before, this is his last year in Cincinnati. Like, no matter
I forgot about
what.
Andy Dalton's contract being
so
we're screwed. If his contract went to next year, we'd be set.
Yeah,
because then it was let the Dolphins tank and we'll tank next year.
The absolute fact that they can get out from underneath him this year and not owe him a single thing means that something has to go amazingly right, or Andy Dalton has to catch Zach Taylor and compromising photos in order for him to keep his job beyond this year. Otherwise, this is it for Andy Dalton. So if you're an Andy Dalton fan, get ready, because these are the last 16 games, presumably, if he doesn't get hurt, that he's going to play in a Bengals uniform.
I love this idea that you have that Zach Taylor. It's not Zach Taylor. It's Mike Brown. Like Mike Brown, if Mike Brown likes Andy Dalton's going to stay. It doesn't matter. Mike Brown will tell Zach Taylor, guess what? You're playing
that's true
him. I don't care.
That's true too, but
Mike Brown is going to go OWG and he's going to be like, I own this team. This is my quarterback. You're going to play him. And Zach Taylor is going to have to deal with it, right? I mean, that's the type of owner that Mike Brown is for this team. All right, let's get, before we switch gears and go into the other fun Cincinnati sport, let's talk predictions for this season. What do you realistically see the Bengals doing this season?
4-12.
Ouch. That really hurts.
Really
hurts.
I think I said it a little bit ago that if absolutely, the thinking of Zach Taylor, if absolutely everything goes right, you're looking at a 7 or 8 win team, and that's everything going right. So, yeah, I think 4-12 is much more realistic. This roster is very talent poor. The offensive line is going to struggle. The defense is getting older, and it's a transition year. This is a year-long tryout for pretty much everybody on the roster, because most of these guys are going to find new homes after this year.
I mean, I'm looking at the schedule, and finding 4 is going to be tough. It's really.
Oh no,
I mean,
but that's the thing. It's the NFL, so I mean, you can just.
It happens, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, 4 wins. That's not very.
I mean, like I'm looking at this, the Dolphins is really the only game that I'm like, that's the win. That's the win, guarantee. There's no real other games that I'm looking at that I'm like.
I mean, so if you say the Dolphins, I'm going to give them 1 division win. I don't know against who, but I don't think they'll
get swept by the other teams in the division.
That'd be Patriots, Bills, and Jets.
Well, no,
he's saying in
the AFC North.
Oh, okay.
So you're
they
saying
won't
you get
lose
swept by the Browns.
I was gonna say they won't lose all the games against them, but I mean you're talking about that's 6 games.
Yeah.
They will win 1 of those 6 games. Then you've got the win against the Dolphins that you can pencil in, and
That's
then
2.
against the AFC East. Is
Yep.
that who else they got?
Yep.
So Jets, they can beat the Jets.
Okay, and then the NFC West.
And then the NFC West, they can beat either the 49ers or Cardinals. They can definitely beat the Cardinals. So there's your 4, your 3 to 4 wins.
We also got the Raiders on the schedule this year, so
yeah,
bring on
there's
Chucky.
Right, there's another one. So that's what I'm saying. You can back into 4 wins with this team, but that's the most I'm giving them. What do you got?
I'm gonna go 5. I'm going to be optimistic and go 5 because
go.
I will feel better about 5 than I will about 4. 4 seems so...
Why does 4 change your
mind? I don't
mind?
know. 4 sounds so brutal, and that's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with 5 wins this year. Let's talk some Reds and get into baseball season here as it's winding down. And the Reds have done us no favors this year. For a team that started off where... They looked like, hey, maybe they could do something here. They made the Homer Bailey trade. They got Puig in. They brought Kemp in, which I know Joe hates that trade and has given me so much crap for that trade. But I will still contend that was a good trade, Joe. I don't even care where they're at. That was a good trade.
Yeah, but you got Bauer.
Right. Essentially, we traded Homer Bailey for Bauer. I'm fine with that. I'm totally okay with that. Plus, we had Puig for a while, and that dude is entertaining as hell. That dude, for a half a season, may have cemented his place as one of the greatest Reds of all time.
Bauer?
No, Puig. Are you paying
Puig?
attention? Are you listening to the show?
I am, but I thought you moved past Puig. Like, he's been gone long enough that I didn't think we were still talking about him.
In a half a season, that dude has become one of the greatest Reds of all time. He fought Pittsburgh twice, bro.
Man, dude, Puig was very symptomatic of everything Cincinnati. There was no reason to fall in love with him. He was only here for half a season. Now he's gone, and somehow, he'll be the next to get a statue after Marvin Lewis.
Okay, here's what I'm saying, though. That shows some growth on the Reds' part, because that is a dude that normally the Reds organization would be like, this is a guy. He is our guy. We are going to give him a baller contract, and Puig is going to be a Red for life, and then they would shell out a ridiculous amount of money for a guy who doesn't necessarily deserve it. Instead, they make the smart move, trade him away, and get an arm that they have control of next year, and solidify what really is a solid rotation going into next season. The Reds' rotation is legit next year. They have a legit starting four next year.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, their starting rotation
provided everybody stays how they
should be pretty good. But again, it's much like coming into this year, where on paper you're like, oh, the Reds could compete, but once the games actually start being played,
I think the Reds were always a team that it was like, this team could go one of two ways, and they went that second way. It wasn't that like, hey, on paper this team can compete. It was, this team is a real weird question mark, and I have no idea how this is going to turn out for them. Let's roll the dice and see what happens.
I'll never forget during the offseason how many times I heard we don't know what the Reds are going to do, but they're interesting.
Right.
They're making moves when nobody else is. Don't know how any of them are going to pan out, but hey, they're making moves.
But was it worth it? Because currently right now they got 23 games left. They have to go 9-14 to not lose 90 games this year. So is it worth it being middle of the road currently in the sports landscape? Is it worth giving your team a little hope, but being super mediocre and not setting yourself up?
Yes, and here's why I say that. Because if they don't make that Homer Bailey trade, if they keep Bailey, they don't get Puig and Kemp in, they kind of keep the same roster. There's still a lot of young guys that played on this team. Van Meter played. Phillip Ervin had a lot of playing time throughout the year. You had a lot of guys that it shows some real promise for the future for Cincinnati. But if they don't make that trade, they're still in the same spot. Like, the Reds weren't going to be a world beater if they don't make that trade, right?
Yeah, I mean,
so you make the trade, you make it interesting, you make it fun, you get people to come out to the ballpark sometimes and watch Puig
the
in a
overall
sleeveless shirt, and it's at least a fun team to watch as they're doing terrible.
Yeah, the overall thing with the Reds was always, wow, they're probably 3 years away from contention. The trades that they made didn't necessarily close that gap any more. It just was, oh, well, they went from 3 years in contention to, well, let's see about this. What's going on here? Those are interesting names. Let's see how it all comes together. So it was always going to be a long-term project because nobody thought those names were going to be World Series winners. But maybe they could win enough games to at least stay interesting into August.
Well,
and they did. They did end up doing that in a roundabout way. They started off terribly, then they got hot, and then, it was July. Now, I mean, people were talking about them, hey, maybe making moves.
It really wasn't until the All-Star break, when they came out of the All-Star break and just completely crapped the bed coming out of the All-Star break, that it was like, all right, this team's done.
Things finally did come together. It just took a lot longer. And so, I mean, they ended up being who we thought they would be, but ultimately that is just a middle-of-the-road team. They're not actually going to win anything, so what does it all matter? The
worst stat this year for this team is that in one-run games they are 19-30.
Yeah,
that is awful. And that's where Cincinnati fans are like, hey man, if we could have just turned a couple of those around, we're in contention. We're right there in it, because they really aren't that far out of the wild card. I mean, you're 11 games back from the second wild card, and if you figure you win half of those games, you're 5 or 6 games back from the wild card. You're actually in a decent striking distance at this point. But that's where the difference is between a good team and a below average team. The below average team can't get those 1-run games across, whereas the good team is able to either close it out or get that last hit that you really need to push the run across the plate. And the Reds have never seemed this year to be able to get that hit in a clutch situation or have a bullpen hold down a lead for them in order to close out a 1-run game. Iglesias may be the most overrated player on this team. And I mean, I'll preface it by saying I hate the closer role in general. I feel like closers are an overrated position. They shouldn't necessarily be as high paid as they are. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why David Bell doesn't go with a closer by committee with this team, especially with how Iglesias has performed and blown saves. Do that the most recent series against St. Louis when they had 2 doubleheaders, back-to-back doubleheaders, and they lost 2 of the 4 games on walk-offs.
The problem with bullpens and relievers is they're so volatile year to year. And, everybody saw what Iglesias did last year, and he was a super valuable piece, albeit on a team that was going nowhere. But so you go into this year and you just expect it. But the problem is with relievers, there are very few in just the history of the game that you can pencil in every year and say, yep, you know exactly what you're going to get from them. I mean, it's a year-to-year thing, and he's just had a terrible year. Now, they probably should have traded him off before.
Absolutely,
before
because now his trade value is garbage.
Yeah,
you can't get anything
now
for him
you have to completely restore, and you hope that during the first half of next year, assuming that, again, the Reds are just kind of middling and aren't, in contention, that he reestablishes that trade value and that next year you can offload him on somebody and people will just remember, all right, yeah, this year he's been great and he has a recent history of being great. So, they'll chalk up last year as whatever. But, man, I mean, across the board in baseball, you're just seeing all sorts of relievers and bullpens on a whole just being terrible. So, I hate to say it, unless you're a team that's coming in with absolute World Series expectations and you have everything else figured out, I mean, you're better off just trading these bullpen guys.
There's no need, especially a closer. There's no need to have a dude that is like specifically there to come in the ninth. These guys are good enough to pitch in high pressure. What's the difference between coming in the 9th inning and then coming in the 7th inning when you're up 1 and you got bases loaded? You just got brought in to get this one guy out.
Oh, absolutely not.
You know what I mean?
The roles are definitely changing, but I mean, it goes back to the Braves a few years ago when they started trading everybody off, and one of the last men standing was, Kimbrel, and it didn't make sense to, hey, this team is projected to win about 60 games. What's the point of having a closer that can close out 40 of those meaningless 60 games? And they traded him. The Reds have just been in this kind of spin their wheels thing of, I think they and the fan base fall in love with certain players, and they don't pull the trigger when they need to on them, and they hold on to them just long enough that they lose enough trade value, and then they don't want to trade them because then they've lost the trade value, and then so here they are hanging on to them, and it's kind of one of those things where you're like, man, I don't really want to marry this girl, but we live together, and we've got a mailbox together, and that's just so convenient. I mean, I'm just gonna see this thing out.
What are we gonna do with the TV if we break up?
Right, and then you just end up getting divorced anyway, and you're like, I should have just called it quits when it was easier to do this. Like that's how I feel like the Reds always do with just about everybody they have. They just fall in love with the guy, and then when it is time to get rid of him, they don't, and then that person ends up turning back to a pumpkin or whatever it may be, and then they lose all value from
Votto.
Votto's slightly different in that he was homegrown and he had so many years coming up. But yes, he's another example of somebody that they probably could have gotten more value out of had they gotten rid of him sooner.
But right now, someone looking like a beautiful carriage instead of that pumpkin, Mr. Acuna.
Oh, man.
Acuna is come out of nowhere.
Okay, so, and that's what I wanted to ask you guys. The talk all year long has been Pete Alonso with the Mets, breaking records with New York, and he's setting rookie records for home runs, and the dude is just balling out in New York. He won the home run derby. Like, this dude was just on fire all year long. And then a later call up is Aquino, and I mean the dude is crazy. He's the fastest to 15 home runs. So my question is, if they didn't make that trade, if Kemp and Puig weren't there and Aquino was like up from the start, is anybody even talking about Pete Alonso at this point?
I don't know. I just it's one of those weird things because I kept waiting for Aquino to come back to earth. Because sometimes guys get called up and they ball out, and then as soon as people get a book on them, as soon as there's film on them, then they come back down to earth and whatever. Especially for a guy like him who he wasn't a highly touted prospect. It isn't like, oh man, the Reds are waiting to bring this guy up, and he's just being blocked by such and such, and he's not at the top of any prospect list. All of this is completely unexpected. And for the Reds' sake, I hope that he keeps it up, especially into next year, so that you can just have something figured out and solidified, because their outfield has been all over the place the last, 5 years. I mean, it's been Billy Hamilton, it's been Duvall, it's been all these guys that they've just moved around and platooned, and nobody's had an everyday spot, and it's just been really weird. It would be nice for the Reds and their fans to be able to say, all right, going into next year, our right field is Aquino, and we don't have to think about it.
Which I think that's going to be the case, right?
You hope.
I mean, who else are you going to put in there?
Well, no, but what I'm saying is you hope that he's not just this flash in the pan, and that it's not next year, all right, well, we've penciled him in, and then next thing you know, he just goes back to being a guy.
Yeah, I don't know if you'll see that. I mean, I think you'll see a step back slightly, but I don't think you'll see.
Well, yeah,
I
don't think you're going to see 15 home runs a month for the rest of his career.
Right. I mean,
ridiculous.
The dude's balling out.
I just hope that he's competent enough and good enough to be just an everyday starter. Like, that's all you're looking for, is somebody who can lock down the position, who's productive enough that they can say, all right, he doesn't even necessarily have to be an all-star, just above replacement.
Right.
Just above replacement.
Give me that WAR, baby.
Yeah.
Give me that WAR.
Come on.
All right, let's talk some UC football here before we close out, because college football is back, and we want to talk a little UC football. They start off the season against UCLA, come out and beat UCLA, which I think we all expected them to do. Chip Kelly out there is just in shambles with that program. And plus UC wants to stomp UCLA a little bit, get a little Mick Cronin rubbing in there, and give him the little middle finger as well. But UC goes out, does what they need to do.
That angle when
right?
they played. Now that I think about it, that never even crossed my mind.
Although I think everybody was fine with Mick leaving. They were just like, yeah, that's great for him, and maybe now we can get out of the first round of the tournament.
That's why I don't think it crossed my mind, is because it wasn't like a sad divorce. So,
but they take care of business against UCLA, and a lot of UC fans I saw were talking all of that smack, saying they want Ohio State. And now you get them. And Ohio State is the favorite this weekend, coming up, a 16.5-point favorite against UC. UC going on the road to the Horseshoe. How do you think this one's going to end up?
I think it'll be close early. I think UC will not get embarrassed, but I don't expect Ohio State to lose this game by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I feel like I feel like if you're putting money on it and you're betting it straight up, you bet Ohio State, right?
Right.
And I mean, UC fans can hang their hat on maybe we can cover this spread, but when it comes down to wins and losses, you're not getting points for winning against the spread,
right?
And I don't think UC has a chance against Ohio State. From what I saw from Ohio State last week, jumping out 28 points, and I realized that they then let their foot off the gas against FAU and let them back into that game. But UCLA is not a team that you can say, hey, these guys are a program that makes me believe we can compete against Ohio State or the likes of Ohio State. Ohio State's a potential college football playoff team.
They are, and the I guess odd thing about that is, and this is just me, I'm not a college football fan, and I don't, follow the sport nearly as much as you, but usually I know a lot more about Ohio State just from proximity and just the names. I can't tell you who's their best player this year. Like I've known the
That's
Bosa's.
because he transferred to Miami.
Yeah,
Tate Martell.
Right.
Right?
I mean,
Tate Martell.
like seriously though, like I
The
don't
star
usually,
of QB1 from Netflix, the season 1 of QB1.
usually I can rattle off a handful of names for Ohio State, and they've just gotten to that point this year where I'm like, they're the number 5 team in the nation, and I can't name.
I mean,
a
Justin
single
Fields is
player.
the guy, right? He transferred in. He transferred in from Georgia last year. He is their starting quarterback. And,
Cool.
And he's balling out. He did pretty good against FAU.
That's fine. It's just
You're
over
just
the
upset
last-
because there's no Bosa's on the team this year.
No, but I mean, they usually, it's like, okay, they had Barrett, they had the Bosas, they had Elliott, they had Pryor.
because
Like they've had
They
all
are a
these,
very young team this year.
yeah,
They are young.
they've had all these guys that were at least coming into the
Which-
year. They've had a Heisman hopeful. Is there a Heisman hopeful on this team?
Which is why, since they are so young, UC might get that edge. Might be a little mentally
I mean,
more tough.
okay, so I think Fickle comes in wanting to prove himself against his old school.
well, Fickle
And that's the-
absolutely wants to blow the doors off this
right.
game.
But I
But
just
easier said
feel
than
like
done.
you're competing. It's as much as UC has improved recently, and as much as the AAC has become a conference with UCF, being in that conversation. It's still night and day between these Power 5 teams and these non-Power 5 teams. Like, you're talking about athletes who are like guaranteed these dudes, and maybe they're young, but they're still NFL talent guys. And on the UC roster, you don't necessarily have that. You have good football players. You don't have NFL caliber guys, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the difference between these two. Also, Ohio State, I was just looking at their roster as you were saying that. They have a guy named Tuff Borland, TUF.
Is that better than the coldest?
Oh, Dakotas? His middle name is To Ever Do It. That is the greatest football name ever.
Yeah.
Dakotas To Ever Do It. I don't know his last name. I don't remember. Who cares?
Man,
It's the greatest
okay,
first name and middle name
we've
ever.
both had kids. Joe doesn't know this one. But so when the people come to your room after you've had the baby to like, get the information for the birth certificate, how do you look those people in the face and say with a straight face,
You know how you do it?
my son is named the coldest to ever do it?
You wait until mom is asleep, and then you're like, give me that form. I got this. And you write out,
Really?
Dakotas
'Cause
to ever do it. Oh, Crawford. Thank you, Joe. Dakotas to ever do it, Crawford.
I feel like this was mom because I'm just going to leave it there.
Tough Borland, TUF and the dude plays linebacker. That is a
It's funny?
solid
Before
football name.
you even said it, if you said guess which position Tuff Borland
Borland
plays,
plays,
I
yeah.
would have said linebacker.
that's-
Absolutely.
He's either a linebacker or a guard. That's
the,
what
that's
Tough
the
Borland is.
lineman, or that is the linebacker's name, no doubt.
All right, around the horn real quick. Does UC or does Ohio State cover the spread? Yes or no? Scott?
Yes, but it won't be by a lot.
Okay. Joe, does Ohio State cover the spread against UC?
No.
Ooh, we got a split
I mean,
decision.
it's 9.5. So
No, it's 16 and a
It's
half.
16
Ooh,
and a half.
16.5. What am I going with? Oh, the Bengals. I'm
Yeah.
getting the spreads mixed up. 16.5. Yeah, I'm going to give them to them. But barely. Again, I don't think that they're going to like run past
I think
that.
they win by 17.
Yeah, that could be.
I went on our show, on our regular show. I did do a Degenerate Dartboard of Doom pick where we pick games every week, and I drew the Ohio State UC game twice, not once, but twice. I threw
forgot
it back
about that.
because I didn't want to touch that one, and then I drew it again. The gods really wanted me to pick this one. I picked Ohio State to cover in that one. I feel like that FAU shock is what makes Ohio State cover this week, because I just feel like Ryan Day is going to be like, man, we took our foot off the gas after scoring 28 points in 6 minutes, and we coasted the rest of that game. We cannot do that again, and he's going to come out and try to make a statement.
Yeah.
Man, this has been a really solid first episode of Cincy Style, man.
I enjoyed it.
I really dig
Good
this
times.
Cincinnati talk. Joe, dynamite drop-ins, as always. I'm very proud of you for not giving us a single Cleveland Browns dog bark throughout the entire episode. So thank you for that, Joe. If you guys want to follow the show, follow us on Twitter at Craft Brewed Sports. You can follow me at Mike Burlon. Follow Scott at ScottyK_Jr.
We're going to be here every week.
Every single
Friday.
week. Follow Joe at Joe Goalie4. You jumped on Joe's Twitter
Sorry.
handle there. But yes, every week we will be releasing a new Cincy Style episode. We're going to get into Xavier talk. We're going to talk some UC basketball, FC Cincinnati, I guess.
Cyclones.
Also, if you guys have any takes you want to drop in, feel free to call up and leave a message on the drunk line, 440-37-DRUNK. Call up anytime you want. Leave a voicemail. We'll talk. We'll play it on the show. We'll give your take, and we'll dissect your pick. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Be sure to tell your friends about the show, and cheers, everybody.
Peace.